Welcome to those who've been here before, a Hastings College podcast made by Hastings College students about the people who've made this place so great. My name is Maddie Downie, and I'm your host. I'm partnered with Luke Liffengren, also a Hastings College student, who produces the program. In each episode, we will talk to and reminisce with a new guest, either an alumni of the college or someone who has impacted the college in a certain way. It is through these amazing people that the college has become what it is today, and so it's our objective to bring those voices out of the woodwork and remember them for what they are. Hastings College not only has a bright future, but a past as well, and we want to keep that memory alive. Our guest this month is a woman of great confidence, of great intellect, and a great laugh. She's tall, chic, and intimidated me a bit when she first walked into the Gray Center, but I quickly became comfortable with her as we began to talk. She was honest when she spoke and alluded to literature throughout our conversation. We laughed together like we've been friends for years, and frankly, I wish we were. This month, I had the chance to sit down with retired English professor and academic dean, Anne Bohlke. All right, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good. So I just have a few questions for you about you and your time at Hastings. Bohlke moved to Hastings from upstate New York with her first husband and her family to expand the family business. The Fairbanks family sold farm equipment, and Hastings was the perfect place to do it. And so it wasn't long before Bohlke discovered the college.
And I just kind of stumbled across Hastings College, almost literally, and thought, gee, it might be fun to teach there. So I kind of wandered into the English department and said, hello, I'd like to teach here. And they kind of looked at me like I was nuts. And that was a more informal time. And still most people were hired through these extensive processes with, all the documentation and the letters and of recommendation and the transcript. I mean, all of which I supplied eventually, but it didn't start that way. And so I was hired about a year later to fill in for someone who was going to be writing a report.
Okay.
I was going to teach 2 sections of composition, and I really enjoyed it.
As she describes it, she kind of just wormed her way in, and they couldn't get rid of her if they tried.
They asked me, well, if we hire you full-time, would you get a PhD? I didn't have a PhD at that time. I said, oh, sure, I can do that. So while I worked full-time, I drove back and forth to Lincoln once a week and took a class that met all evening. And summers I took classes and I took my exams that way. And I wrote my dissertation getting up at 4:30 in the morning so that I could work on the dissertation from 6 to 8 in the morning.
Wow.
And then, there's nothing like a deadline.
Bohlke enjoyed teaching literature, poetry most of all, but one of her most favorite classes to teach was literary criticism.
And the word criticism there means like analysis or way of understanding. And working with students through primary sources, we started with Plato and Aristotle and, didn't read them in Greek, but, we read, translations of them and, their ideas about literature and then applying those to various things that they read. It was really interesting to see how students, if you do give them real ideas that they can actually talk about, that, they dig it, man.
Oh,
yeah. So that was wonderful. And also, I would have students who had never been especially strong in school, who'd mainly come to college like maybe to play sports or something, and even they would get into that class. And it was so much fun to see this kid, with a 25-inch neck arguing about Aristotle.
Yeah.
It was great.
She called her time in the English department the Golden Age, and she spoke briefly about tenure, saying it's what allows teachers to go beyond the comfort zone and spark meaningful conversation in the classroom.
And it's not a matter of job security. It's protection so that people can really pursue ideas and do their best work.
She spoke to the benefits of being an English major, which were encouraging to me, given it's what I've declared.
Of course, one of the beautiful things about being an English major is that it actually prepares you to do pretty much whatever kind of job you want, because you can think critically and independently. You can express yourself well in writing. And you usually, now there's more emphasis on being able to express yourself well orally also.
Yes.
There wasn't back in the day. You'd just take a paper that you'd written and it's different now, and that's a good thing.
For her, teaching meant she got paid to do what she enjoyed most.
Well, I have this general impression of what a cool thing it was to be paid a salary to read these wonderful books and talk about them with other people who were also interested. A lot of people have jobs they hate. Those jobs might pay pretty well. Often they don't even pay well, but sometimes they do pay well, but people just hate to get up in the morning and go to work.
Right.
I never had that feeling.
One of her fondest memories of being a professor was when she taught a detective fiction J-term class.
We read classic mysteries starting with Edgar Allan Poe, who, originated the genre pretty much, and then went through classic detectives, hard-boiled, kind of postmodern. And meanwhile, as we were doing this, and then we would, and this also had a film component, and so we would be seeing great sort of detective films, and we saw Humphrey Bogart, the Maltese Falcon and that kind of thing. And ultimately, the students, instead of taking an exam, each person could work with somebody else, but they were supposed to write their own detective story, using the elements that we had been talking about in class. And I recommended that they set it, always write about what you know about. And so since you're at Hastings College, and got some of the best. People wrote just wonderful stuff. And as a warm-up to that, we put students in affinity groups and had them write group mysteries.
Okay.
And I think my favorite group mystery was one year I had about 6 or 8 young men who lived in Bronx Hall.
Oh, okay.
And they took those Bronx Hall stereotypes and flipped those. What they did, and I think I still have this mystery somewhere in my archives, but they came home from a night of drinking at PJ's, and PJ's is a bar that's no longer open, but trust me, they would, every Thursday night, and it was this wooden building that was a fire trap, and they had this balcony, and that was when everybody smoked.
Yeah.
And so, I was really always expecting to hear that place had burned down and, taken. But they were coming back from a night of drinking at PJ's, and they discovered that somebody had broken into their room and stolen their fake IDs, their porno mags, and their bottle of Everclear. And
That's amazing.
And so, and they said, well, of course, they weren't smart enough to solve this mystery, so they went over to Weir, where the smart guys lived.
Yeah.
Well, none of the people at Weir were home. They were all in the library studying. Well, these Bronx guys said, well, we'd never been to the library, so we had to find somebody who knew where it was. Anyway,
That's so creative.
It was just wonderful.
Bohlke told me that those same students wrote stories about unpleasant professors and soon-to-be mother-in-laws mysteriously disappearing. She was proud of her students, and she spoke of them in a high regard. Curious, I asked if she thought the students enrolled now were just as good as those she had then.
People are always saying in there that, things used to be so much better.
Right.
We're still here. 10th century, the poem The Wanderer is all about how awful things are now, and the world's probably going to be destroyed pretty soon. Well, come on. People are always saying that.
Right.
So I would bet that given the right circumstances, that students now are just as curious and just as creative, just as smart. Now, I think they're under different pressures.
Right.
And I think that's unfortunate. I mean, again, there's so much pressure for short-term stuff. But I think we've always been able to look to we've always whined about that. So no, I remain optimistic.
She then moved to being a part-time professor and took up the responsibilities of being Associate Academic Dean. Later, she retired from teaching and became full academic dean. There, she helped a number of different students, those on academic probation, those interested in international travel, and, particularly, those competing for the Cree Weir Scholarship.
The students who kind of rose to the top on that, it was an outside committee, not of Hastings College employees who evaluated those applications. But then, like, the 5 or 6 finalists were invited to an interview dinner in Omaha, and this was at a French restaurant, and the meals served in courses, and various experts actually in the fields that these finalists were going into were invited to this dinner. And so at each course, the students would rotate to another table and be essentially grilled by...
Oh my gosh.
And so, I mean, it was potentially, a wonderful opportunity for these students, but super high stress.
No kidding.
And so part of what I did was to organize stuff that would prepare students to go through this process.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And so I would talk to them about, like, how do you write a good application in a situation like that? And we had like a practice dinner at Lockland where we would serve them, for instance, snails in the shell. And and that's one of the things that they're sure. I mean, if it's hard to eat, it would be on this squid.
Oh my gosh.
How do you eat squid? And like with the snails in the shell, you've got this special little fork that you use, and a little thing you hold the shell that looks sort of like an eyelash curler, and and so we would. So we would practice that.
When I asked her what was one skill that she had learned from her time at Hastings, she said it was communication. She said that the range of people that she had to talk to made her more confident in her communication skills, especially when talking to resentful parents over the phone as academic dean. She retired from Hastings in 2012, and when she did, she took it upon herself to reward herself with 2 retirement gifts.
One of the things I decided that I would get myself a couple of retirement presents.
Okay.
When I retired, that's part of the way I've enjoyed my retirement. The first thing, I'd always wanted a sports car, so gosh, I got myself a sports car, and I had it my last year here.
Okay.
And when I was working, and I usually don't drive at short distances. It isn't good for it. Gunks up the engine. But I would drive it on Fridays.
What is it?
It's a Mercedes SLK, which is their small sports car, and it's silver. And so it was lots of fun at the end of the day to get in that car, and it has the retractable hardtop.
Oh yeah.
And just push that button, and I had. Actually, my first car, I was 25, but it was a sports car, an old beat up, and wrestling with that cloth top. And one of the great improvements in civilization is the retractable tops now work. So I could just push that button and whoop, down would go the top, and,
I could just envision you in there. Like,
it was fun, yeah.
Yeah. Do you still have it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, do you?
Of course.
Good.
Yeah.
That is so funny. Did you drive it here?
I didn't, because of the weather.
Oh, okay.
Now what we'll cruise in it this spring.
Okay.
I'll get in touch with you, and we'll
take it for a drive.
We'll go for a cruise.
That
Yep.
sounds like so much fun.
It's lots of fun.
She also decided to drive that car on a road trip to see her sister in New York City, while taking stops in several other states along the way. It seems to me like retirement is treating her well, and I am very excited to take that ride with her in the spring. Anne Bohlke is definitely one of Hastings' greatest gems. I had a great time getting to know her, and I'm sure everyone who has had the pleasure of knowing her thinks the same. We are lucky to have her. Thank you for listening. I'm Maddie Downie, and we'll see you next month on Those Who've Been Here Before.